Well, we're going to start another documenting of a project. This one, as I've said in some of my previous ones to build up to it, is called the Red Dragon. So if you want to see how it's going, it's under my YouTube channel, I'm Not Childish. And just so you know how that's finished, I'm at a higher level of immaturity. And this project is called Red Dragon. As I said, this is not necessarily going to be the name of the car when it's finished, but this is what I'm calling it for just YouTube purposes. We're going to cover the outside of it. I guess first though, this car is going to be legal to go 750 in the quarter mile. That's 7.5 seconds. It can't go over that speed, at least as we're building it now. With extra bracing and things like that, it would be able to. And it is going to weigh no more than 3,600 pounds. He's going to use steel doors, steel front end, so this car probably will be upwards of over 3,000. We'll just have to see. The thing here is the heavier the car, the more bracing and heavier tubing that has to be used. And that's because the weight of the car creates inertia that can crush the cage in the event of an accident. So the heavier the car, the more bracing that has to be in it. The faster the car, the more bracing that has to be in it. On this car, just to start out, we have new quarter panels, or at least pieces of it. And what we have is an addition of 3 inches of width on the wheel well opening. This is going to allow him to put larger tires on it and to keep them out closer to the edge of the car, or the inner part of the fender, or quarter panel, excuse me. So what they did, Warren always has this thing of saying we, so even though I'm not part of this, he always says we. Anyway, this panel has been split and the 3 inches added. But besides just adding the 3 inches, it has been moved forward 1.5 inches. Now that allows the wheelbase of the car to be shortened by 1.5 inches, which then allows more weight to be transferred to the back end of the car. That may not sound like a lot of movement, and you would assume maybe there's not a lot of weight, but it adds 300 pounds to the back of the car, and it takes away 300 pounds from the front. So in essence, you have transferred 600 pounds of weight, which now becomes significant. Then we move back to the spoiler that they put on this, and this is not a wing, this is a spoiler. A wing is, as you might think of, something that stands up above the car, air can travel underneath of it. This is what typically is used for not as much downforce, but to stop the air from coming back over and curling in behind the car. If the car just comes down following its normal curves, there's turbulence behind it which creates suction. These panels causes the air to go on out because of the sharp edge. Now also, even if it does come back in under, it's not doing it right at the back end of the car. This, I'm going to call it a duckbill, but that's not what they call it, is used to help give you downforce, and of course to do that, as I said, cut off that turbulence down underneath. Then a gas door has been put in it. And this is so you do not have to open the trunk to fill your fuel cell. This is really important in a car that has a spoiler on it, because the spoiler is attached to the trunk lid. And to then open it, you have to take out the Zeus fittings on either side. And once you do that, and after you do that, then you have to disconnect this support bars underneath, that keeps the spoiler from, bending downward. But now it's very flimsy. And as you're lifting it up, you might even need 2 people to help hold it in place. Moving around to the front of the car, there's a lot of effort to reduce weight. So the fenders had to be taken off, and then the cars, and then you start looking for places that metal doesn't need to be. So this corner here, well, let's go to the other side, because there it's not cut off yet. So here's how the car would be originally. This hole was put in there just so Warren could see in there and figure out where he wanted to cut it. So then you go back over to this side, and you can see that that's no longer there. It was cut right at the, I forgot what it's called, but it's right at a weld seam. And so that doesn't take away any strength. It's then cut right in front of the door hinges, which, if you look inside, they are also attached to this inner part of the body. So this material here, from here forward, isn't necessary to make the doors sturdy. And as was said, this door is steel, and it's going to stay that way. Of course, it'll be gutted, and it'll have Lexan in for the windows, which Lexan's lighter than glass. Down here, there was pieces of the mounting that could be cut away, and pieces of the mount part that goes to the frame. But this brace here was put in to help carry the weight and ensure that there wasn't too much of the support cut away from it. In this case too, there's a necessity for this space to be open, because this is where the headers are going to go. So he wants his headers to exit from the fender or the side of the car rather than underneath. I should point out too, this car is alcohol, which has a tendency to blow flames out the exhaust. And so that's another reason for exhausting to the sides of the car rather than have the flames underneath. The firewall will be cleaned up, and panels closing all the holes, excess holes. The core support was cut up. This hole here didn't exist. There was a piece of material that was in here that's gone. It came out to about here. The radiator opening had a piece on this side and one on the other side. That's been cut out and cleaned up. And as much for aesthetics, but still to lose weight, these holes were put in place. And then to keep some of the strength there, these tubes will be welded in only in 4 of the holes that were drilled. And let's see, what else do we have to cover here? Well, I think that's about it for this thing. So I won't be covering this one as much as my own, but I will be on and off taking photographs of it. I did have one more thing to talk about. Right in this area, this was cut out because it came out to here and across, and so it's now been cut out so it goes back in this way and across. This allowed the engine to be moved back, I believe, about 2.5 inches. The original motor mount is sitting here, and I say original, but it was welded in, and the mounting holes would have been about here. So let's say this mounting point would have been about here. So as you can see, that's probably about 2 inches back, which will give him more weight to the rear. Now the rest of the build, as far as where it's at now, I'll cover hopefully through the next video, showing the bracing and all that's in the floor at this point. Also, one other thing about the rules for this car is that it has the stock subframe under it in the front, which is all steel. And for that, I think we're done. See you.